Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for coming on. So we talked a while before the show started about the Coast Guard, and my cat got mentioned and a few other things. But can we talk about how did you get started running your business and kind of what got you wanting to be an entrepreneur and wanting to start coaching?
Cool. So yeah, that is a very loaded question. So the entrepreneurial life is just sort of something that's always been a part of me. Like I started working when I was 6 years old at my grandmother's store, and so Beanie Babies were really big back then. And my first business was sewing like sleeping bags and little hats and scarves and things for Beanie Babies and selling them at my grandmother's store. So it's something I've been doing for forever. I obviously had like lemonade stands and all that stuff. And then I like got a paper route and I bought a drum set at 9 by myself. So it's just sort of been like, I've just always really enjoyed making my own money, making my own job, my own hours and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I got started with the whole entrepreneurial mindset. But how I got to where I am now is a really crazy story. I grew up like following the mold, what everybody was supposed to do. You know, you go to school, you get good grades, and then you go to college, and then you graduate, and then you get a job, right? Like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And it never really felt right to me, but I did it anyway because I was like the little goody two shoes that followed the rules and did what I was supposed to do. So I went off to college and I changed my major a whole bunch of times because I liked so many things that I couldn't pick. And I wound up with psychology, graduated with that, moved out to Hawaii with no job, no place to live, nothing. Like I just moved there. And so it took me a while to find a job, even just at like a snack shop. And then I was like, you know what? I really want to start a business. I want to start a tutoring company. And I had tons of connections in the schools. I had a mentor who was fabulous and had a very similar business model. And I had a lot of parents that were really interested. But I held myself back because I went into an interview with a potential tutor, and his first reaction was, "Oh, you're really young. I thought this was an actual business opportunity."
Oh man,
And he walked out.
fuck
And
that guy.
yeah, and so instead of like listening to all of these other people who were supporting me and totally behind me, I listened to that one guy. I scrapped the entire business, and then I went back to grad school because I figured that, well, I don't really have anything to offer. I'm not good enough and that kind of thing. And so that always sort of stuck with me. And then of course I went to grad school for something I didn't really want to do. And I held myself back again on that. And it was like a theme throughout my life. And I kept
Yeah.
doing it and kept just feeling lost and like I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. And eventually, long story short, but eventually I became a health coach. I got certified as a health coach and I was doing that. And then I realized that I didn't align super well with that. I like health and fitness and that, but it just wasn't where I wanted to be. But the one thing that I noticed was that the majority of people, they didn't struggle with knowing how to live a healthy lifestyle. They didn't struggle with that part. They knew you eat better and you exercise, and it's like not rocket science. What they struggled with was really believing in themselves and the ability for them to achieve that. So they didn't
Mm.
think that they could do it. They're like, well, someone else can do these goals and get to their stuff, but I just can't do it. And they had all kinds of excuses as to why, but really when it came down to it, it was just a whole confidence issue. And so I took that component and I started coaching just specifically on that because that's the major problem behind everything. That's why people don't take action on any area of their lives. And so I figured if I could help people with that component, they can achieve any of their goals, no matter what they are, whether it's health and fitness, whether it's starting a business. So that's how I wound up sort of where I am now.
That's really cool. That's man, I'm sorry about that guy. But on the other hand, I guess maybe he gave you a gift because he showed you that this is something that is obviously a huge stick up in your life and is must be something that other people are struggling with as well. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I see every bad thing that ever happened to me or every like experience that I've had as what shaped me to get to where I am now. And I love where I am now. So like I have no regrets about any of that. And the background in teaching and joining the Coast Guard and all of this other stuff that happened in between, and the traveling. I traveled for 6 months, and I realized while I was traveling, I was helping all kinds of people figure out their lives. So I kept meeting all these people when I was traveling who either they were really young or they were kind of like in their 30s or so, and they just weren't doing something that made them happy, or they just had no idea where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I would have one conversation sometimes with someone, and they would go home and totally transform their lives and tell me that I was the catalyst for them doing it. And I was just like, wow, that's really powerful. But I had no idea how to market that back then, so I just never really did anything with it. But over the years, I realized, like, I am actually good at this, so why not share this with the world? Like, why would I hold myself back and not help other people?
Yeah. And that's really cool. That's really cool that you figured that out. That's something that I've struggled with as well, and probably still struggle with to some degree, but I am now choosing an experience where I'm no longer struggling with that. Real quick, we have a few people watching. So if you're watching this, be sure to drop a comment, say hello, ask any questions you might have. Hannah Hermanson just said hello. So hello, Hannah.
Hannah.
Good to have you. Good to have you on board. Yeah, that is. So I'm reading a book right now. Actually, it's one of those books where I finished it, but I went back to read more of it because it's so good, called Remembering Wholeness by Carol Tuttle. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but yeah, it's deep down the hippie woo-woo train. I don't know if that is anything that you get into with your clients.
School in the middle of Vermont, so there's that.
But it's all about kind of reframing how you see the world is part of it, and getting into the spiritual realm that we all existed in beforehand, and how the theory is that, I'm not saying this is my doctrine now, but just the theory is that we are all souls at the end of the day, and the end of our lives, I guess. We're all souls, and you may have agreed with that person who told you basically to go, that your business plan is terrible. You may have asked him before you went into this world, you might have said like, hey man, I really need you to come in on this day and tell me that my business idea sucks, because then that's going to be the thing that puts me on this path down a road that ultimately leads to what I actually want to do.
Cool.
And
that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I feel like if you look at the world that way, whenever someone does anything bad to you, you can just think like, I wonder what I'm supposed to learn from that. Or like, I wonder what agreement I made with that person back in the spirit world.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know that I've like ever gone into the whole spirit world part of it, but as far as like, I always believe that every single thing and every single person happened in my life for a reason. It didn't shape who I am and how I got to where I am. And so actually I've been watching The Flash.
Oh yeah.
And the whole idea of like time travel and stuff, I'm like, no, don't go back, don't change anything. Your whole life will change and it'll be terrible. Don't do it. And every time I see those comments too on Facebook, I'm like, no, don't go back and change stuff, because like it can change everything. And then you might not like the person that you become.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if time travel is a great idea. On the one hand, I don't know if it's ever going to happen, because I feel like if it did happen someday, then we would know about it by now, right? Like, because they'd be coming back in time.
You just live in an alternate universe, and therefore.
Oh, Shannon. I don't know.
Oh yeah, gonna get all Rick and Morty on you now.
Oh my gosh, we probably do.
Just live in an alternate universe, and there could be alternate histories where, like, Hitler won World War II. Like that could be a thing. Like you don't know.
You never know.
We didn't. So
there's like the whole theory of the multiverse is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Definitely. Very off topic.
Yes, very off topic.
To think about.
But because there's a universe where you're a podcaster sitting in this house interviewing me, and I'm a confidence coach.
Yeah, see, there could be an alternate universe for that.
That would be whack. But
I don't feel like you could be a confidence coach.
maybe I need a confidence coach to teach me that I can. But anyway, let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, let's say that you have someone who comes into your group and they say to you, like, Shannon, I have these things that I want to do, whether it be in a professional life or an entrepreneur type of person. How do you help them become more confident?
So I focus a lot on baby steps, because like action is what changes things, right? So if you're not taking action, you're obviously not going to reach your goals. But it's not quite as simple as that either. You kind of have to take like the right actions in the right order. And so essentially people will come in and they might be like terrified of a Facebook Live, for example, but they know that if they do a Facebook Live, it'll help them with their business because people buy from people. And the majority of our understanding of each other comes from body language. So if you don't have video, people can't connect as well with you. And so they know it's important and they know they should do it. And they know it's as simple as clicking go live and just talking, but they just can't take that action yet. And so what I do is I help bring them to the point where they can take that action by giving them really, really small, like baby steps. And so if they're so shy that they can't talk to any strangers at all, then you give them the little baby step to just like, if they're at a grocery store or something, and they wouldn't normally say hi to the cashier, say hi to the cashier. Like it's not, like something really small. And it doesn't be big. And then once they're like, okay, that wasn't so bad. That didn't totally blow up in my face. That was okay. Then they build on that. And then some people, they're okay with going live to their family and friends, but they're terrified of what a stranger might say. And so even though going live to family and friends is a little bit scary, they can hit the like go live button. And so I start people out with that, and they'll go live on their personal page and just say hi to their family and friends and tell them what they're up to. And they'll do that. And then they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then it's just baby steps to get them to the point where they can go live and feel really confident in themselves and what they're doing. So that's one example of what I would do. It really depends on the problem that they're having, of course, because everybody has different hangups and different things that they doubt themselves on. And a lot of people have limiting beliefs that they hide behind. And so it's sort of breaking through all of that stuff, but making it so simple and so easy to do that they can't fail at it. Because once they start experiencing successes, then they start to build their self-efficacy and their confidence around it. And then it becomes much, much easier to take a bigger and bigger step.
What are some of the main limiting beliefs that you see people having? Like, what are there like 3 or 4 that everyone seems to get hung up on?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest ones is around price. People don't think that they can charge what they want to charge. They're like, well, no one else in my niche charges this amount of money, or if I charge that, no one's going to pay it, or my target audience just doesn't have the money for something like that. And I see that a ton, and it's totally not true. So when I first started this journey, well, when I first started, that's a whole different story, but when I started this coaching journey the last year or so and really diving into it, I decided I needed to work with a coach. And I came to that decision after a call in which I ended up investing $9,000 in myself to work with a coach. Before that, I was like, oh, I'll just get some free information and it'll be totally fine. And so I went on and I like watched their webinar, and then I got on a call with them because I'm like, yeah, let's get a little bit more free information. It'll be great. Right. I'm gonna start this. It's going to be so awesome. And I got on the call, and when I really like dug deep into things, and I realized I was terrified of charging people for stuff that I had spent my entire life learning and mastering that other people just don't know. But I was so afraid of charging because I had convinced myself that no one would pay that. And by the end of this call that I had zero intention of enrolling on, I spent $9,000, and I had $150,000 in debt. I had very limited income coming in, And if I didn't make money fast, I literally would have been living back home at my mom's house, which was like the last place I wanted to be living. And so I really had to make it work. And it was terrifying. But, I was the epitome of someone who didn't want to and also didn't have the funds available easily. I had to apply for another line of credit to do that. And I was willing to do it because I knew at that point that if I didn't, I was just going to keep wasting more and more time. And it was going to take me another 5 years to start my business, if not more. And so I always look at myself as the example of like, okay, even if people tell you they don't have the money, even if you think your target audience doesn't have the money, if they really, really want it and they know you can help them, they will absolutely find a way to come up with the money. I've seen people literally sell their cars. I've seen people live in their cars to invest in coaches, which I don't suggest doing, but I'm just saying, people on their last dollar will figure out a way if that's what they really believe will help them at that time. So it's never about price. It's always about the value that you can provide and the outcomes that you can give to the people that you're working with. So that's one that I always see come up, and it's sort of a way to reframe it and look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah. That's something a lot of people struggle with, including me.
Yeah, a lot of people do. And I mean, I doubt myself sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, people really, and then I'm like, okay, I have to rephrase this. Like, of course they will. If I can provide value and if I'm coming from a place of service and I know I can get them to an outcome, then absolutely, why wouldn't I do that? Right. And if they don't commit, if they don't pay the money to commit to the program, no matter, whatever it is, and they have no skin in the game, they tend not to get any results and they're still stuck where they were. So you didn't really help them. You can give people all the information in the world and they're not going to go any further unless you really dig very, very deep into what's holding them back and unless they have some skin in the game. So that's one thing I've noticed. I used to give some of my programs away for free to family and friends and things who were like super committed and super jazzed and like ready to go. And they dropped off after a week or two and they never, ever looked at anything again. And it's because they didn't really have a commitment to it in a way that was a little bit scary for them at the time.
Yeah, it's paying for stuff. It's almost, you're doing them as much of a favor as you are yourself when you charge what you're actually worth. And that's saying a lot because obviously you're doing yourself a huge favor by making money, but yeah, you're doing them a big favor too because you're just asking them to take it seriously and take you seriously.
Exactly. Because I can tell you how many times I have bought a $47 or $97 or even like a $400 program. And I looked at it for like an hour or two and I just never looked back at it again. I never followed through. I never implemented the strategies. And then I could tell you that when I invested $9,000 for that other program, you bet I followed through. I went through every single module multiple times. I was constantly, asking for feedback and all of that and really, really making it work. And I stuck with it. And that's the difference, right? So all those other programs, somebody made a little bit of money off of me, but I never really got any value from it. I never got any further along in what I was doing. And so they weren't really serving me or their other clients because we just didn't have enough skin in the game to really follow through. So I always think back to my own examples of like, yeah, I would buy this program for sure. And, someone might make a lot of money selling a cheaper program, but they're not really serving and they're not really helping other people. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And that's how you can live your life in integrity and be confident that you're giving value to other people.
That's a great perspective to have. That's something that a lot of people need to understand. Also, people need to understand that, if they don't go out to eat one night less out of the week for a month, then they can afford most programs, or at least the, earlier parts of most programs, yeah, not it's not as expensive. Like, I guess my point is, like you said, people worry that other people won't be able to afford or won't pay, but like they totally can if they really care about it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you go out to eat a little bit less, or you have like some crazy collection of photography equipment and you don't use most of it anymore. Sell off some of that. Like there's ways to come up with the investment if you're really committed to getting the result and you know that that person can help you. So when the person who's selling is completely focused on serving their client or their potential customer, it's less about selling at that point. It's more about you just really want to help this person, and the way to help them is to value yourself and what you're offering.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you help people who come to you and they just don't think that they can do it? They just don't think, like, they want to start a business, but they just don't think that they can do it. Or, they have some root issue that you can tell they're dealing with some like really personal stuff or something. How do you how do you help that person where it might be a little too personal for you to just call them out on it? But
I call people out on everything.
Good.
I don't have any qualms about that. Like, if they're coming up with a whole bunch of excuses, I call them out on it. I'm like, hey, why do you believe that? Why do you think that that's true? And really dig into that. And then we look at like how many times they actually have succeeded in things in their life, right? So like people have a track record of success. They just don't always look at that. Most people focus on all of their failures, and they look at other people and they're like, oh man, like they did, these one or two like things in their life, and then all of a sudden they were like super successful and they were like a millionaire in a year. And like that's just not realistic. No one's a millionaire in a year. Like it took years and years and years to get up to that point. Even if they hadn't launched a business prior to, maybe their business has only been in for a year and they've made $1 million. But their expertise has been coming for so many years prior to that, and tweaking their message and all of that. It's not something that just comes up overnight. And so one thing is not comparing yourself to others in that situation, because you don't see everything that they struggled with to get to that point. So that's one thing for sure that we get into. And then, another is just really looking at all the successes you have had. So everybody has, their own talents, their own things that they're really good at. And if you can bring out all of those successes and be like, hey, like you succeeded in this and this and this and this and this, and like, how did you do that? Let's replicate that in a business setting. Let's set goals that are smaller and more achievable and build up from there, because you absolutely can do it. Some people, it takes them a little bit longer than others. Some people have to work on a little bit more of like limiting beliefs or mindset and stuff than others do. Some people, they need a little bit more technical know-how. So they might need to study a little bit more and learn a little bit more about what they're doing, what they're offering. But anyone can do it. It's just a matter of putting that work in and always making sure that you're taking action towards your goals.
Yeah. And then I think you gain confidence slowly as you start to see yourself making a little bit of progress.
Exactly. Like that's the whole point of having like these smaller stepping stones, is every time you meet one, you're like, oh, I did that. Yes. Cool. Yeah. Success. This is great. And then you meet the next one, you're like, oh, another success. This is so great. Rather than focusing on all of your failures. And the more successes you can build up, the higher your confidence level in that area is going to become.
Yeah, absolutely. That I feel that way about this very show. It's been a long journey, and you start to feel better every episode. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, that's like, it's definitely, you're confident in the things that you're good at, but you're always better at something than somebody else is. So all you have to do is be better at something than somebody else, because you're teaching or you're, whatever it is that you're doing. You don't have to be at the expert level. And actually, I was watching someone the other day and she explained it really well. And it's a topic that I talk about a lot, but this is a much better way of explaining it. I wish I could remember who it was because it was fabulous. but she was referring to it as like someone's at a kindergarten level and someone's at a PhD level, right? You don't really want the PhD teaching at the kindergarten level because it's just too much of a gap, right? The PhD doesn't remember what it was like to be in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so if you have like a third grader teaching a kindergartner, so someone who knows like a decent amount, but maybe not as much as the PhD yet, teaching the kindergartner, they're going to excel a lot faster because that person remembers exactly how it felt to be in that position. And that's something I see too. I spoke at a university a couple of weeks ago, and I immediately was able to connect with the students in that classroom and get them engaged, get them asking questions. And after the class, I was talking to the professor of the class, and he told me that one, he had never seen anyone in his 15 years of teaching engage with the class that quickly. But two, that some of those kids hadn't spoken the entire semester. He didn't know what their voices sounded like. And to me, what that meant was like, I was humble. I related stories of like when I failed epically right after graduation and like how that felt. And they just immediately were able to connect with that because they were close to it. Whereas most of the speakers that were coming in are high-level executives who are running, you know, Fortune 500 companies who want to appear perfect, and they're there in their suit and tie, and they can't recall what it felt like to be that 21-year-old kid who was terrified of going out into the world for the first time. And so you definitely want to be better than the person that you're teaching. You want to know more than they do, but you don't want to be so far up here trying to teach this person that you can't relate to them anymore.
Yeah, that's something I've found a lot. And actually, like some of our very best podcasts on this show have been with the people who are just a few steps ahead of our audience, you know, because they, like you said, they can relate, they can remember, you know. I find those to be the most, the people that I relate with the most, you know, are people who are just a few steps ahead of me. And yeah, I think you're totally right.
Yeah, people who are just like so far above that level, it's really hard to connect with them. You look at them and you're just like, oh my God, it's amazing. But you really can't believe that you can ever achieve that is another problem. Like you look at someone like, you know, Oprah, right? Like, how do you get from like where you are now to Oprah status?
Yeah.
That seems terrifying. Like you have no idea what that looks like. You just have no clue. But Oprah started out with nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she had all these little steps and stuff. She wasn't just always Oprah. And so, you know, you have to find the people who are just a few steps ahead of you and follow them, and then kind of keep building and change your mentors and change your experts as you go along in the process.
I used to do that. I used to only listen to people who were like 20 steps ahead of me, and you get nowhere. You're inspired. You're like motivated as hell. You know, and that's why I love having people, you know, come on the show who are at that level, because it gives you people that you can aspire to be, you know. But then you're like, okay, but what do I do today to get there? You know,
what tends to happen is people freeze. They freeze in place and they don't take any action because no action to them at that point is good enough, because it's not going to get them to that level immediately. And so it's always like knowing what is enough for right now and then continuing to learn and grow and build on that.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of what you're saying is like speaking to me, you know, and I think if it's speaking to me, it's going to be speaking to everyone else too.
I hope so. I like helping people.
I think so. I think so. Do you work a lot with college kids or people who are entering into the workforce kind of early on, or do you mostly work with entrepreneurs?
So I'm working on kind of both right now, mostly entrepreneurs as far as the online stuff goes, but I have been speaking at colleges, and I've been asked to go back to one of the colleges to do a whole workshop with their students. And then I've also been asked to go to Boston College Law School to help with their moot
Awesome.
trial. Yeah, so I'm like helping them train because body language is so important. Body language and the way that you're saying things is incredibly important for lawyers. And they're sitting there with these note cards, like staring down, reading off of it, and just like terrified. And so, I mean, you can't win an argument like that. So I'm going in and I'm training them with body language and intonation and stuff like that to try to get people to like and trust them and to really listen to what they're saying.
How do you start teaching someone to have better body language?
It's really just becoming more observant initially and realizing what different things mean. So women tend to be a little bit more intuitive just in general. So men have a little bit more of a learning curve. But yeah, there's some definite like tells and stuff like that. There's certain gestures that you don't really want to be doing if you want people to either trust you or take you seriously. They know it's different gestures. So like if you want someone to trust you and empathize with you and like you, you don't want to be talking to them like this, right? Like if you're like trying to drive home a point and you're pointing at them like that, that's very, very aggressive. And there's a time and a place for wanting to come off as aggressive like that and really drive home a point. But it's not the time and place when you're trying to get a jury to accept that your person is innocent or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You have to create empathy at that point. So talking with open palms and kind of going like this and sort of almost begging and pleading with them in a way, it drives home that message a lot better than if you're like pointing at them like this or not showing any sort of body language at all. So there's a lot to it. About 55% to, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 55% and 70% of our communication is through body language. And it's not something that we even realize on a conscious level. So making it more of a conscious thing and understanding why you feel the way you feel when certain people are talking to you, it puts you in a position to elicit certain emotions and thoughts from others. So pretty useful stuff.
Yeah, for real, especially for lawyers. Do they teach that in law school at all, or?
They don't, not even a little bit. And only about 50% of people who go to law school actually become lawyers.
Yeah, I know. That's a
very small amount. But yeah, they don't teach anything like that at all. And so that's the other thing. I'm actually talking to a law firm right now, a pretty large law firm, about training all of their new hires, all of the new that they're bringing in. So yeah, I do this with online entrepreneurs, but I've also been doing a lot of stuff offline, which has been really fun. It's nice getting out too, because we spend so much time behind computers, so it's really nice.
For real. What else have you been doing kind of offline?
That's most of what I've been doing offline is like the universities and stuff like that. And just connecting with people as much as possible. And then online, I've been working with coaches and I've been working with people who create programs to teach different things and yeah, basically stuff like that. I've been working with a few people who are sort of like an e-commerce kind of space. That's a little bit different because that's more, they're just afraid that they can't succeed versus they're afraid of like really putting themselves out there. Although it is always good to have video, even if you are like in something like e-commerce, because again, people buy from people. They don't buy just because you put a website up. They're going to buy because they connect with your story, they connect with your brand and who you are and the information that you can provide that Amazon doesn't. Because otherwise you're going to lose all your sales to Amazon.
Right.
So,
for real.
You have to have a story. You have to be able to connect with people and give them a reason to purchase from you, even if you're charging higher prices than Amazon. Because people will actually pay more if they like and trust the person they're buying from for the same product. And sort of flipping that on its head, when I was back in college, I used to buy back textbooks from students for this company. And I could give them at least a penny for every book. Most of the books were worth more than the bookstore was giving them. And so a lot of people would come to me. But there was occasionally times where I was only offering, maybe $20 for a textbook. And I knew the bookstore was buying it back for $80.
Oh,
So I
wow.
told them, I was like, hey, you can get $60 more if you go over to the bookstore with this book. And they're like, you know what? I don't like them. I don't trust them. I don't want to deal with them. So I'm just going to sell it to you because you're honest with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, well, wow, that's crazy. So like that totally changed my entire perspective because it's not always about money.
Yeah.
It's really about
Absolutely.
connecting with people and building those relationships.
Real quick, we have 4 people watching right now. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. If you're watching the replay, also feel free to ask because you're in the group, I'm in the group.
Yeah, I'll pop in, answer questions
The
anytime.
people, yeah, we're all in the group. We're all here together. We're all just humans trying to figure this out.
Right now, I'm thinking of like High School Musical though. Like we're all in this together. Little sing song time for you guys. Seriously, that just popped into my head.
It's okay. Go with it.
I always go with it. That's how you connect with people too. You just always want to be authentic and just really be yourself and
yeah.
don't do what every single other person out there is doing. Yes, like follow some of their strategies at least to a degree and be like, oh, okay, well, like this seems to work really well as a marketing tool. But put your own personality on it. Don't rip off what other people are saying or doing or writing in their copy. Because if it doesn't connect with you and jive well with you, then you're going to attract the wrong people anyway. And you're going to be miserable and have all the wrong clients working with you.
Absolutely. Do you listen to Joe Rogan's podcast ever?
I really need to start listening to podcasts more. I do like
good.
Joe Rogan and I have heard him a few times, but I've never really listened to his podcast.
Oh my God, it's so good. He just did an episode with Dan Carlin. Dan Carlin's the host of the Hardcore History podcast, which is also an incredible podcast. But they were talking about this exact thing. They were talking about how you really need to just be yourself. And I love what Dan Carlin said in that episode. He said that there's so much stuff out there in the world. There's so much stuff online. There's so many podcasts. There's so many YouTube channels that like if you just go out there and try to create what you think is going to work, it's not, because you're just going to end up copying someone else. And he said the golden thing that you're missing is like they need you. Like you are the thing that is missing from the puzzle out there on the internet. So like whatever it is you like to do and whatever message you have, that's what's missing, because you're the only person who can provide that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true because every single person has their unique story and their unique talents and their unique gifts. And yeah, you might teach the exact same topic somebody else does, or you might run the exact same type of business that somebody else does. But all of your background and how you got to that point is never going to be exactly the same as someone else's. And so the way you present yourself and the way you present your work and the way that you show up is always going to be unique and different from what anybody else is doing.
No one's lived your life.
Nope.
Or had your interest.
Even if you're like twins and you've gone through literally all the same stuff your entire life, you're still going to have seen things a little bit of a different way. You don't always perceive things in the same way. You have your own story.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always different from what other people have. And that's what you need to really get comfortable with sharing with the world. And that is scary. It's scary to really authentically put yourself out there and just be who you are. I always like watch those YouTube videos of people who are like doing like crazy dances and whatever, and you're just like, wow, that's really embarrassing. Like, I don't know if I could do that on camera, but at the same time, you're like, man, I'm inspired by them because they're completely themselves and they're putting themselves out there and they don't care what anyone thinks.
Usually they look pretty awesome.
They do. And some of them are just hilarious, but you can't care what other people think because you're never going to please every single person and you don't want to. The people that are going to give you crap over the years, the people who are going to try to tear you down and make you feel bad about what you're doing or tell you that you're a fraud or whatever it is that comes up, they're not your people.
Yeah.
They're not your clients. They're not the people who you jive with. So who cares? There's like 6 billion plus people on this planet. Who gives a crap if a couple of them don't like you?
Absolutely.
You
you know?
You can't be an entrepreneur and a people pleaser.
Right.
It's impossible. You just can't do it.
So one last question to wrap this up. You're obviously a very confident person yourself, and you coach people on confidence. How did you go from the person who like had their whole business shut down because one person said something negative to who you are today? Like what resources did you have that helped you?
Yeah, so I was even worse than that. I used to be so bad that like I was the most negative person you could ever meet. I literally couldn't take a compliment. I thought everyone hated me. I had no self-worth whatsoever. And then of
Wow.
course that guy came along and I was just like, oh, yep, that just reinforces my own beliefs that I can't do this. And it took a long time, and honestly I wish I had invested in a coach sooner because it would have made things a lot easier. But I mean I struggled, and part of it was going through some really rough experiences, getting hurt in the Coast Guard, having to go through 9 months of physical therapy, and having to end a career that I worked my butt off to get to, and then seeing my grandmother at the same time, literally the exact same time frame. She retired, and 3 days later she passed away in surgery. So she never even got to enjoy her retirement. So I'm looking at myself and I'm like, man, I'm in so much pain. I am miserable. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do the activities that I used to love doing. And I don't want to get to a point in my life where I retire and 3 days later I pass away and I can never enjoy that. I never want to get to that point. And so after about 9 months of physical therapy, I was like, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I was like, I'm just going to go travel. That's what I'm going to do. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to make this work, but I'm going to do it. And I did. And I went out and I traveled for 6 months and I broke my ankle like a week in. And it was awful. It was like a crazy trip. But it just changed my entire life by just finally deciding that I did not want to continue being a victim of my circumstances. I wanted to start taking control of my life. And there were a lot of hiccups along the way and a lot of mindset work. And I did work with 2 different coaches on the mindset and reframing everything. And I still find myself, having negative thoughts or doubting myself sometimes or whatever else. But as soon as I realize that I'm doing that, I just stop myself mid-thought and out loud, I'll say something really nice about myself or something like that. And that's helped tremendously in completely training my brain, like just my subconscious brain, to think in a very different manner than I used to. So again, it took a really long time and a lot of mistakes along the way. But had I invested in someone a little bit sooner, it probably would have been better as far as getting me to the place where I wanted to go faster. But it took a while. I got there. So
Yeah. That's really cool. It's really good that you did get there because now you can help others also get there. You can be the person that someone else needed, or you can be the person that you needed, but for someone else.
Yeah, I wish someone like me had found me back then. That would have been really great. And that's why I do what I do, because it's all about, helping other people really get to that point where they can feel comfortable sharing their gifts and their talents with the world, because everyone's here for a reason. Everyone has something that they're just amazing at, and they need to get out there and they need to just share that with people, because if they're holding it back, they're keeping their gifts from other people, and someone out there probably needs them to go out and be their authentic self and come and find them and help them come up to where they can be. So yeah, just be yourselves, get out there and be as authentic as possible, share your gifts, and don't care if you screw up 20 times on the way or more. You're going to mess up all the time. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall on your face. But focus on all of the successes along the way.
Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we wrap this up, is there anything you want to say or promote before we finish?
Yeah, if anybody wants to join my group, that would be cool. It's called Developing Confidence for Entrepreneurs and Professionals. And I go live in there about every other day. I share a bunch of stuff in there. So it's small now, it's just starting, but it's going to be a really great resource for people. And I'm not afraid of holding back. Like, I actually give value as much as possible, because I'm not afraid of people not wanting to work with me because I've shared too much with them already. I think that's kind of a bad mindset to be in. So
I
I
think
like
that's another,
value as
yeah.
much as possible.
I think that's another limiting belief for us entrepreneurs is that like if you give too much, people are gonna no, like people are gonna say, "Oh, this is great. I wonder what their paid stuff is." You know, they're if I pay them and hire them, it would be even better.
Yeah, they're gonna think that. And then also, like, even if you put every single thing out there that you ever do, you know, first of all, people aren't gonna piece that all together and make it
Right.
work. Very few people are gonna sit there and find every single thing you've ever done and try to piece it together and try to make it work for them. They need someone to kind of guide them through it. And so just put yourself out there, put your stuff out there, and don't worry about that part of it. Because if you focus solely on helping other people and really getting them to a great result for them, then I mean, clients are just going to come your way.
Shannon, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And we'll do this again sometime.
awesome.
And last time, if you're watching the replay, feel free to drop a question and we will not forget you,
Okay.
replayers.
Perfect.
Shannon, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.